I do want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. As a longtime FANG member and a certified friend of Matt, I'm always happy to present one of the chapter meetings. I do actually have a presentation that I'm going to drive in a few moments, so that the screen will shift. What I will ask is, if you have questions, you can ask them as we go and put them in the chat, and either Hav or Joyce will be monitoring it and call them to my attention. And there are always a lot of questions. I'm willing to stay as late as you would like me to stay. It's my kids' vacation week. They're having a lot more fun when I'm not around than when I am around, as it turns out. So if I can stay till 11 o'clock tonight, I'll do it. So I suspect there won't be quite that many questions. But that said, I am going to share the screen. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay. And for some reason, it's not moving. Oh, there we go.
It is.
Okay, now it is. Yeah, thanks. Okay. I'll start off with a quote, and I'll leave it out loud just in case anybody doesn't read it out loud, just in case someone doesn't have eyeballs. But he is a charismatic leader who inspires people to follow him, a strategic thinker who can master the details, a tireless worker with incredible focus and problem-solving skills. He is well-liked by his employees, but is also able to make and execute unpopular decisions. Above all, he's an exceptional communicator who can convey a vision to any audience, from Wall Street to the most junior employee. And that sounds like an awfully good leader, doesn't it? Somebody that we would probably all want to work for. And someday maybe we will work for someone like that, or perhaps we already have. Working for this particular individual, however, might be a problem since he's in prison. The quote was given to me by somebody, I can't reveal who it was, but I will say she is in law enforcement, and she was describing somebody that she helped send to prison for a very serious set of white-collar crimes. And that's, a lot of psychopathic CEOs would be somewhat like this. They have incredible problem-solving skills and focus, and they have charisma, and that's problematic. But it's also an opportunity, as we'll get into later. So a little about me, relatively standard background. I did my tour of duty with, at the time, the big 8 firms. I've been a part-time CFO for 26 different companies. And my day job, I am the founder of the CFO Leadership Council, which is a group I started largely based upon some advice Matt gave me back in the day. And I am also a founder of the MIT Sloan CFO Summit and a senior contributor to Forbes. And I suspect that some of you are wondering, okay, that's an interesting background. So why are you writing a book on psychopathy? And it's a good question. So a few years ago, I worked for a company as its CFO, and I discovered basically incontrovertible proof that there was a lot of fraud going on in the sales organization. There were a lot of basically word for word identical side agreements that salespeople signed on their own without my knowledge. So I called this to the attention of the VP of sales of the company, and he just went absolutely ballistic. He was livid, not at the salespeople, but at me for making the accusation. And I'll never forget how he just went right like this, right in my face, 3 inches away, and kept sticking his index finger in my chest and denied it. How dare you, over and over again. He started kicking and knocking over furniture. It was a scary sight. And then, however, I actually felt bad for him, thinking, okay, he clearly does not know that this is happening, and he's sort of a victim too. But I knew something was happening, even if this fella didn't know about it. So I had my IT guy, who was very discreet and reported to me, to monitor some of the emails from the people to find out what was going on and how deep it was. And I learned that the same fellow who went ballistic and demanded an apology from me not only was aware of it, but orchestrated the whole thing. And I remember thinking, God, this guy is a better actor than Meryl Streep, was my reaction. Forward the clock about a year, and actually a couple of years, I was in a presentation by an FBI agent called the Psychopathic CEO. And it clicked that this guy wasn't just a crook and a jerk, but he was actually a psychopath. He checked all of the boxes. And she asked the audience how many people believe that they may have worked for a psychopath at some point in their career. And about half of us raised our hands, which gave me a mixed reaction because I was sort of relieved that I wasn't the only one dealing with this. On the other hand, to find out that so many companies were being led by psychopaths, or at least people who display the characteristics of psychopaths, was truly frightening to learn. And that's what inspired me to write the book, and that's what brought me here today. Oop, wrong direction. I can read that again. I want to get one thing out of the way, and what I've learned from talking to people is there's a lot of confusion between psychotics and psychopaths, and they're very different. Psychopaths are more like sociopaths and narcissists and even Machiavellians. But if someone talks about a psychopath, they're talking about somebody, psychotic, excuse me. They're talking about somebody who's lost touch with reality. They suffer from delusions and hallucinations, and they may not be immoral. They may commit immoral acts, but they may not even be aware of it. They may be so far gone. They certainly wouldn't be aware that the acts are immoral, but they're just some genuinely crazy things that psychotics can do. It is a form of a mental illness, and they, for the most part, they lack the ability to learn from mistakes or even to learn from punishment. They'll just keep doing it over and over again. I'm not excusing it, but to an extent, it is beyond their control. Psychopath, on the other hand, they do understand right and wrong. They may struggle with it a little bit, but fundamentally, if you explain something's wrong, they can get that. They simply won't care. And not all of them, but a large number of them, and in particular the CEOs, are intelligent, manipulative, and likable. And it's, again, it's a personality disorder. It's very close to a sociopath. Someone told me that the main distinction between a psychopath and a sociopath, and there are others, but one of the main ones is that a psychopath is born a psychopath and a sociopath becomes one. The reality is, if you're a CFO and you're working for a CEO who is either a psychopath or a sociopath, you don't particularly care if they were born that way or they became that way through a tough childhood. It's their behavior today and what you can do about it that's troubling to you. And then the other thing is, unfortunately, psychopathy, as of today, is untreatable. And a lot of you are wondering, how common is psychopathy amongst executives? And there have been a lot of attempts to qualify it. This is a great book, if you're interested in the topic, Snakes in Suits. It was the first book that looked at psychopathy within the business community. And Babiak and Hare, they estimated it at 3.9% in the entire executive suite, not just CEOs. And one thing you've learned is the higher you go up the corporate ranks, the higher, the more likely you are to be a psychopath. Most experts, however, put it between 8% and 12% at the CEO level. That I've read a lot of studies. That seems to be that. I occasionally get a 6 or a 15. I've never seen another one that was as low as 3.9%. It was the first, and they sort of are groundbreaking experts in the field, but it seems to be a lot higher. The Australian Psychological Society estimates that the number could be as high as 21% amongst American CEOs. So this is startling. The general population has a rate of about 1% psychopaths. And even in the prison population, it's 15%. So if the Australian Psychological Society is right, and it's somewhere around 21%, that means there are higher rates of psychopathy amongst CEOs than there are amongst prisoners, which is a scary, scary thought. So, Hav, I'm wondering if there are any questions right now. I'll take that as a no.
I'll jump in.
Okay.
Jack, Robert Hare's earlier book, Without Conscience, thought that the prison population proportion was larger. And he had spent his career studying the prison population in British Columbia, but he thought that was about 25%.
Yeah, he himself has given different numbers. I've read that book too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the consensus in the prison population seems to be about 15%. But again, it is one of those things that it's difficult. It's not like, say, having cancer or diabetes or something like that you can track, right? Because, there are psychopaths walking around amongst us, and, we just don't know who they are necessarily. And, they may not even know in some cases, although it turns out a large number of them do. So anyway, one of the things in pop culture, when you hear psychopath, you might actually be thinking of a psychotic, but the image of a psychopath is of Hannibal Lecter or the BTK killer. But in reality, a lot of psychopaths just want money, power, or fame. Not many of them want fame. Some of them just want a nice car. And where do they go to get that? Often it's to the corporate world. And, fascinating thing to learn that we probably all work with psychopaths. So, and another thing, if the population of 1%, and I've heard 1% to 3% is the population of psychopaths, but I'm going to go with Babiak's number of 1%. 330 million Americans, that means that there are, 3.3 million. Am I doing that right? Yeah, 3.3 million psychopaths in the United States. That would be like the fourth or fifth biggest city in the country. So, they are clearly a large part of the population, whether they're 1% or 3%. And they do gravitate towards the corporate world. So the top 4 career choices for psychopaths, this is according to Kevin Dutton. Another great book, if you're interested in the topic, is The Wisdom of Psychopaths. But he listed the top 15. The top 4 are CEOs, attorneys, media personalities, and salespeople. And then some of the other ones are a little bit scary. Doctors are pretty high up there, clergy, people you might trust. But the top 4 of these, and I probably should acknowledge, in the interest of full disclosure, that I have held 3 of the 4 jobs. I've never been an attorney, but I've been a CEO, I've been a media personality, and I've done sales successfully as well. So nothing to see here, just pointing that out for the record. And you're probably wondering how to spot a psychopath. And, what are the things that you as a CFO might want to look for? First, they lack empathy and they always blame others. Just for example, in the book I've got coming up, The Psychopathic CEO, I interviewed a clinically diagnosed psychopath, and he just wouldn't accept responsibility for anything. Trying to give you an example. He hacked, when he was interviewing for a job, he actually hacked the HR person's email account from afar. And he said, well, if she's going to be stupid enough to have a password for her password, she's going to have to live with getting hacked. He literally did not blame himself. He thought it was her fault for having an easy to guess password, which, she's not blameless, but they're always, nothing is ever their fault. They're always blaming other people for problems, and they completely lack empathy. They simply don't care. They are reckless thrill seekers. Again, sometimes that's difficult to see. Sometimes it's not. If you have a boss who, drives, if you go for a drive with your boss to lunch and he goes 110 miles an hour for no particular reason, that might be a little bit of a warning sign that something's not quite right. Probably nothing wrong with being a thrill seeker in your recreational life, but you don't want one running your company for the most part. And then, one of the big things, and it's tough, and I tell a lot of HR people this, trust your instincts here. A lot of them report, there was just something missing. They couldn't put their finger on it, but there was something just kind of not there. They, they didn't make eye contact. They didn't seem to understand jokes. They had no empathy whatsoever. They didn't care. There was just something almost vacuous about the people. A lot of people have reported this. And a lot of times psychopaths are so superficially charming that they can actually convince people to dispense with the standard interview process. Several times I've heard stories where psychopaths, they've performed so well on the interview that people said, this person's great, let's make them a job offer right now, because if we go through the formality of checking references and that sort of thing, that's going to take time and we might lose this candidate. So they're that good. They can persuade you that they're that good anyway. And a lot of times, like HR people will say, no, let's follow the process. But then they sort of get talked out of it and bullied out of it. So if you're in that position, If you're the only one that wants to put on the brakes, that might be a battle worth fighting. They do tend to, particularly as they're climbing the corporate ladder, they do tend to take credit for other people's work. That's probably one of the reasons that they're attracted to a career in sales, besides the fact that it can be very lucrative, is it's actually easy to steal leads from one of your coworkers. A lot of psychopaths in sales, they don't view competitive firms as the competition. They view their fellow salespeople as the competition, which is a scary thought. But they think nothing of stealing leads and making other people look bad as a tool to make themselves look good. It's just something that they do. They tend to be very narcissistic. They tend to be very charming, a lot of times in a superficial way, but the more the people who've done it for a while get better at it, as it turns out, they're capable of learning and practicing fake charm. And they're very manipulative, and they can manipulate in multiple directions. They can manipulate through fear. They can scare you into following their lead, or more often they can charm you into following their lead. They find that more effective and easier, but if they need to scare you into submission, they're very capable of doing that. We're actually going to see a video clip which shows an example of that in a moment. And then, the one thing to be worried about, they're often undetected because they're so darn likable. They're basically, a lot of them describe themselves as playing a role. If they're getting a job or performing in a job, they just want to be likable. And because of that, and even when they're in the job, everybody likes them. They're friendly. They smile. Maybe they smile too much, but people like them. Board members like them. Rank and file employees like them. Customers like them. And that allows them to sort of do their thing without being detected for a long period of time. So I'm going to show, this is a clip from the movie Wall Street, which was in 1987. I'm guessing most of you know it, but perhaps a couple of you don't. In this movie, Michael Douglas played a Wall Street wizard. He was completely ruthless. The character's name was Gordon Gekko. Charlie Sheen, I almost called him Martin, but I think that's his dad, played sort of his protege in the movie. And in the scene we're about to see, Charlie brought him a incredible opportunity through inside information he had that involved his own father's company. And Gordon completely went behind Charlie's back and basically was destroying the company so that he could get the pension assets under his own control. It turned out the pension was more valuable than it. So in this scene, Charlie has just figured out that he's been screwed and he confronts Gordon with it. So this is about 90 seconds. And so let's watch it. And then after that, I'm going to maybe turn this off and we can chat for a couple of minutes about it.
There's no audio.
Oh, no audio. Okay. That's not cool. Let me share screen, share computer sound. Okay, on mine, it's default. Share screening is stopped as the shared window is closed. Okay. Can you guys hear that?
Nope, I cannot hear it.
Gosh, okay. Give it another shot. We may have to skip this. It's too bad because it's a, stop the share.
Maybe if you avoid presentation, I don't know, just thinking.
Oop.
What the hell do you want?
How
I
about
just
now?
found out about the garage sale down at Blue Star. Why?
Can you guys hear that?
Yes.
Last
Okay,
night I was reading
Beauty.
Rudy the story of Winnie the Pooh and the honey pot. You know what happened? Stuck his nose in the pot once too often. He got stuck.
Maybe you ought to read him Pinocchio, Gordon. I thought that you were gonna turn Blue Star around, not upside down. You fucking used me.
Well, you walking around blind without a cane, pal. Fool and his money are lucky enough to get together in the first place.
But why do you need to wreck this company?
Because it's wreckable, all right? I took another look at it and I changed my mind.
if these people lose their jobs, they got nowhere to go. My father has worked there for 24 years. I gave him my word.
It's all about bucks, kid. The rest is conversation. Hey, buddy, you're still gonna be president, all right? And when the time comes, you're gonna parachute out a rich man. With the money you're gonna make, your dad's never gonna have to work another day in his life.
So tell me, Gordon, when does it all end, huh? How many yachts can you water ski behind? How much is enough?
It's not a question of enough, pal. It's a zero-sum game. Somebody wins, somebody loses. Money itself isn't lost or made, it's simply transferred from one perception to another. The richest 1% of this country owns half our country's wealth, $5 trillion. 1/3 of that comes from hard work, 2/3 comes from inheritance, interest on interest accumulating to widows and idiot sons. And what I do, stock and real estate speculation. It's bullshit. You got 90% of the American public out there with little or no net worth. I create nothing. I own. We make the rules, pal. The news, war, peace, famine, upheaval, the price of a paperclip. We pick that rabbit out of the hat while everybody sits out there wondering how the hell we did it. Now, you're not naive enough to think we're living in a democracy, are you, buddy? It's the free market. And you're part of it. Yeah. You got that killer instinct. Stick around, pal. I still got a lot to teach you. Obviously.
Okay, I'm kind of curious. What was your reaction to that? What did you see?
Well, I see, first of all, people smoking, that you don't see that anymore. You see those computers with screens black and green, that you don't see them anymore, that they were all little squares. But also, you see someone who, has the traits that you are describing here, which is Gordon Gekko. And then you see the other person who, he has been raised in a different world, or maybe he got a more balanced personality and he was never exposed to this kind of thing. He's just getting to know, other people and other kind of, behaviors. At that point, it seems like he's going to be upset, but he's not going to quit. So at the end of the day, either, you become one of them or absolutely you will go your own way.
Yeah, it's very interesting. At the end, he basically got Charlie Sheen's character back on his team, right? That was the flattery. He's like, you've got that killer instinct, kid. I still got a lot to teach you. And all of a sudden he was back on Team Gordon, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I saw a lot of the classic signs of the psychopath there. Like one of them was he didn't accept blame. He said, you're a blind man walking around without a cane. A fool and his money are lucky to get together in the first place. And then he, gives the whole rant on the capitalist society as though it sort of excuses his behavior. And then, one of the other things, like he mentioned, he still told Bud Fox was the character's name. He's still told, Bud, you're going to get rich and be able to take care of your dad.
Right.
He didn't care that he just screwed his dad. He thought he could make up for it with money.
Well, I think the kid was still thinking about all the other people that they were working there for decades. When he went and said, listen, this is not about, just my dad. It's all these people that they have been working for ages.
Yeah. And he was like the union or something. Fernando, did you have your hand up?
Yes. What I just wanted to share as well is that to me, it shows two main characters, traits of the personality, which is really exercising power, like influence and whatnot, and two, his certainty is so strong that even though the things that he's saying are not necessarily making sense, the other person is buying it.
Yeah.
It overwhelms with the delivery.
Yeah, indeed. And I mentioned earlier the scary part and the charming part. He kind of did that. By the way, and we'll go back to the presentation in a moment, but one of Gordon Gekko's great frustrations is, I'm sorry, one of the Oliver Stone's great frustrations was, and he was the director of the film, people thought Gordon Gekko was the hero of the movie. You know, it's like, geez, did people really miss the point there? But he was the villain of the movie. Charlie Sheen wasn't really heroic, but you know, he was one of many victims along the way. So anyway, why don't we go back to the prezo? And hopefully y'all can see that. So why do psychopaths find success in the corporate environment? Oops, these are moving quickly. The one thing is their eye is towards moving up the ladder. It's not necessarily a great quality, but they put themselves first and they put their career growth first. So they're always going to act in their best interest. That whole idea of sacrificing for the greater good, sacrificing the company, collaborating, they're not going to do that unless it benefits them. So it's not really a nice quality, but they've learned to actually make it a very effective way to climb the corporate ladder. Similarly, they're just very laser focused. If they have a task to do, they can block out anything and get it done. And you know, another thing, it's not a good quality in a human being, but you know, sometimes it is a good thing when you're running a company, is they don't feel emotions the way you and I would. You know, take for example, you know, Gordon Gekko, hundreds of people lost their jobs and he simply couldn't care. But I can give you another one that, you know, was real life for one of my members. But so it's a situation, there was a plant in the Midwest, I won't say where, it doesn't matter. And it was just underperforming and they kind of needed to close it down quickly. Not quickly, but they needed to close it down. However, like 60% of the people in this community either worked there or someone in their family worked there. So if you close the plant down and with nothing to replace it, you're going to devastate an entire community. And someone like you or I, we might ultimately come to the conclusion to do it, but it would take us a lot of time. We would, you know, look for a lot of different alternatives, maybe bring in an outside consulting firm, would invest money to retrain the employees, you know, would give generous severance package. Psychopath would not do any of that. They just would not care. The plant needs to be closed. We're closing it today, and that's that. Not a nice quality in a human being, but sometimes it is an effective quality when you're running a business, as much as you don't, you know, you may not like it. Also, they are highly charismatic, many of them. You know, we just saw Gordon Gekko, and I know it was an actor, but a lot of them are like that. They can just get people to follow them because they're smooth, they're polished. They are extraordinary communicators. And again, to the point I made earlier, they learn to mimic acceptable behavior. So they, you know, even though they themselves don't feel anything, you know, they just sort of learn what's expected from them and they mimic that behavior, not unlike an actor playing a role in a movie or in a play. And then the obvious question is, can we screen out a psychopath? And the answer gets a little bit frustrating here. So a lot of people think we can, you know, do it with a personality test. And the reason is understandable. However, here's the problem. They know the result that you're looking for, and they're going to kind of game the system a little bit. They are pathological liars, and they certainly are going to lie on a personality test if it's going to help them get a job that they covet. You know, one thing, the psychopath I interviewed, he admitted to me that he lies on anytime he takes a personality type of test. He compared it to like going to an online dating service. He's like, if you're attracted to a woman who, you know, likes to go for long hikes and travel to the south of France and listening to country music, you might change your profile to claim those things because she's somebody that you want to get to know better. He didn't see any difference between those two things. Again, and also the other thing is we've actually made it easy for them to lie because, you know, they're going to do their homework. So they're going to go to the website. They're going to read all about your company culture. They're going to understand your code of ethics. They're even if you have things like employee of the month, they're going to understand what leadership values in their employees, and they're going to pretend to be that person to get the job. they charm and lie during the interview process. So it's sort of tough to screen somebody out if you fundamentally like them and make a connection with them. So, a lot of people say, well, we have a very robust, thorough interview process. These people are going to beat it. Again, they tend to embrace the culture, and you've given them a blueprint to do so. If you're a culture that thinks casual Friday is a big thing, I realize just about everybody has that now, but they're going to pretend that they love casual Friday. But if not, they're going to say, nope, we need to have a certain formality and professionalism every day of the week. Whatever it takes to get the job, they're going to pretend to be that person and share those values. And then again, I guess I've made the point enough, but they do view themselves as an actor playing a role.
Jack, I think Hare gives us a hint of something that can help us screen out a psychopath. He says that in a business situation, about half of all people are completely fooled by the psychopath. Half of them see them as who they are, and another half are neutral on them. And of course, this personality conflict tends to kiss up and kick down. And I think this leads to a situation where what you can do in an interview process is make sure that job candidates are not just interviewing with people who might be their potential boss or their potential peers, but to also put them in situations where they may be waiting in a room with somebody who is a lower level employee, where they're not told that this is part of the interview process. They're just waiting with this person, or they're just sitting with this person. This person's taking care of them while they're waiting for their next interview. And as a result, get somebody of a relatively low rank and have them as part of the interview process without the candidate knowing it. And I've seen this happen in the corporate world where a executive level candidate was sitting with somebody who they perceived as a lower rank, unknowing that they had a say in the process. And in this case, the lower level employee, in one instance, actually came out and said, I don't know what it is about this person. I can't put my finger on it, but I don't think they're right for the culture. And the CEO who ended up hiring this candidate anyway, later said to me, John, I should have listened to them, because that person was rarely wrong about things, rarely wrong. And they had sensed there was something wrong with this candidate. They spoke up about it, and the CEO and the other vice president, who were the decision makers, hired him anyhow. And they said they learned a lesson from it.
That happens far too often. I've heard so many stories like that, people, and the one reason that trick, if you want to call it that, doesn't work is psychopaths know it's coming now. It worked before. It was sort of a commonly known tactic, but these people are preparing for that sort of eventuality. And in fact, in the hotel industry, there's actually a little trick they used to use, but they can't anymore because candidates are prepared for it. But while somebody's waiting for the interview, they'll set up a scenario where somebody will pretend to be a customer of the hotel and lost or confused. Usually it's an older person or something like that. And they ask for help. They act like, geez, I just stumbled into the wrong room. And they actually, if the person helps them, they say, this is somebody we want on the team. They were willing to give up interview time in the name of providing really good customer service. It doesn't work anymore because now everybody knows they're doing it, and it's the same type of thing. But yeah, I've heard so many stories like that where one person will speak up. That's why, to my point earlier, if you think something's wrong, put on the brakes. It doesn't mean you have to stop it, but ask a few more questions. Not only check the references, but check the references, that they don't give. He worked at ABC company. Geez, I know somebody that worked at ABC company that he's not using as a reference. Let me check it out. So anyway, a few reasons why they're so formidable in the workplace to deal with is they intimidate allies into silence. So if the charm doesn't work, they will silence people through threats and fear. That might be less effective now than it was several years ago, but they still do use that effectively. So people you think might be on your side, if you try to take on a psychopath to have him or her removed from the role, they may sit silently. So, you know, you might be one person taking on the entire company, and it's a tough battle to fight. The other thing is they're ruthless and they're remorseless. Some of them have said the fight's not over until I've won, and they're just going to keep coming at you. I had a horror story. One of my members actually successfully had a psychopath removed, someone he believes is a psychopath anyway. And then 1 year later to the day, their car was very heavily vandalized in their driveway on the 1 year anniversary of the CEO being fired. And he said he lived in like a crime-free neighborhood. And then again, it happened on the 1 year anniversary to the day again. And this is an area that was literally like the only cars in the neighborhood getting vandalized, and happened twice on the anniversary. So the third year, this psychopath, possibly, vandalized the wife's car in her office. And it got to the point, they knew that he was the one doing it, but, you know, police couldn't do anything based upon, you know, there was no evidence really. But they actually ended up moving to a different part of the country. So this was a case of they successfully removed a psychopath from the job, and he just decided to ruin their life. The other thing, they're far more manipulative. They are going to get board members, senior HR people. Everybody is likely to be on their side. And the other thing is they view your compassion as a weakness to exploit. So, you know, if you present yourself as somebody who's forgiving and you believe in second chances, they're going to play on that. Where's my second chance? They view, and I don't mean this to offend anybody, but they view people who are religious, if your religious views are something they can exploit too, because most religions do call for forgiveness. And it's like, okay, well, you're a devout Christian or whatever it might be. I would like some forgiveness from you. I think you're being judgmental and not true to your religious beliefs. They'll actually do that sort of thing. If you care deeply about your employees, they might target an employee if they don't think they can get at you. Okay, I can't get you, but you love your controller. What if I make your controller's life miserable? How do you feel about that? So they're very formidable to take on as an opponent. And then the obvious question is, what can executives do about it? And are there any questions at this point, by the way? I'm a little bit over the planned time, so.
No, I don't see any questions, but if anybody wants to chime in, feel free.
Okay, the main thing you can do, document everything very thoroughly and report it to firm counsel. There are two caveats with that. One, CEOs probably, if they think that you're an opponent, they've probably arranged through IT to have access to your email. They've probably said, so-and-so is a problem. I unfortunately need to monitor their email. They'll lie to the IT person to get it. They'll say, we suspect that they're committing fraud against the company. Can you have all incoming and outgoing emails go to me? So you don't have the privacy you might think. The CEO might be reading your emails in real time. And the other thing is, do keep in mind that the firm's counsel represents the company, not you. So if you're committed to fighting this battle, you might want to consider hiring your own attorney. Understand your opponent and yourself. One thing psychopaths do is when they meet you, and I forget who was talking earlier, but sort of the three buckets, psychopaths put you into one of three buckets. Either you're an ally, somebody that they can use and manipulate, and that's somebody that's usually they target people who are near the flow of information. So IT people, human resources, finance and accounting. They'll also like befriend, say the CEO, if they're a middle level employee, they'll befriend, say the CEO's executive assistant, so they might get some FaceTime with him or her during the course of things. But the point is, if they've identified you as a threat, they've actually been planning your weaknesses for years. There was one instance, a member told me he confided to his boss, or not confided, but his son had cancer, which he told his boss, and he was battling that. And the CEO said, this might be useful later. So he went to the board pretending to be concerned about the CFO and said, nothing to do. I just want you to know he's in a real battle. His son has cancer. I think we need to go easy on him. A few months later, the relationship began to sour, and the CEO persuaded the board to fire the CFO for his own good. It was the type of thing, Mike's son is getting worse. He needs to take care of his family. I think for his own good, we need to get rid of him. We can give him a generous severance package, but he's not going to do his job, nor should we ask him to. Let's take care of him. The psychopath standpoint, problem solved. The board was none the wiser, and the CFO lost a battle that he didn't even know he was in. So the other thing is, understand psychopathy as best you can. And the big one here is focus on the action, not the diagnosis. Nobody on this call is qualified to diagnose a psychopath. I'm writing a book on it, and I'm not qualified to do it. So don't use the word psychopath or words like that. Focus on the actions that they've already taken and why it's detrimental to the company. The other thing, it might be obvious because perhaps you'd be doing it anyway, but do your job extraordinarily well. Do it to the best of your ability. It's just hard to find a very talented, invaluable employee. And be realistic about your chances of fighting. The odds of you battling with the psychopath and winning are relatively low, for the reasons I've documented earlier. And, candidly, maybe it's wise to know when to quit. Do you really want to have your life ruined by this one guy? It might be time to quit and start over at a company that is a better fit for you. So, Hav, do we have a few more minutes, or do you want me to wrap this up?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I get asked a lot, are there any famous CEOs who display traits of psychopathy? And, the answer is yes. And what's interesting is some of them are really effective CEOs. The one that a lot of people find surprising, but you can actually Google his name with the word psychopath. Steve Jobs of Apple Computer. A lot of people think he's a psychopath. And which just goes to show you, psychopaths can do good under the right circumstances. So, what about Steve Jobs that would make him that? He didn't strike me as having obvious vanity. Other people have said otherwise. But this is a guy, ego out of control, very power hungry. He actually has fired people, not only in public in the sense at work in front of other people. He actually did it at one of the Apple conferences one year. He literally fired a guy right over the speakerphone. This was 15, 20 years ago. He had a daughter that there was no doubt that it was his, and he denied it anyway. And, she lived in poverty. They reconciled before he passed away, but, just didn't care. She didn't have any value to bring to his life. And he just sort of denied her existence. And, despite him being one of the richest people in the country, wouldn't help her financially. He had this odd habit. It's not necessarily indicative of psychopathy, but he used to actually at the bathrooms at the Apple offices, he would actually take his shoes and socks off and soak his feet in the toilets. And a lot of people say, I don't think I heard that right. You did. He literally would soak his feet in company toilets. I don't know that that's necessarily a psychopathic trait, but it's certainly a weird one. Another one recently been in the news, Elizabeth Holmes. She is from Theranos. And this is a woman, at one point, her net worth was $6 billion on paper. And she actually, she herself was afraid of needles, or so she claimed. But she invented a non-invasive blood testing kit. And she raised all kinds of money. Some of her supporters included people like the Obamas, the Clintons, Dave Schultz, who was secretary. Dave Schultz is a wrestler. I forget George Schultz, who was the Secretary of State under George Bush. She fooled some very influential and powerful people, but her product didn't work. And she did seem to try to fix it, but she lied and tricked people into thinking it worked. And what happened was people were getting, false positives and false negatives. It was basically a little bit more effective than a coin flip. And she just didn't care. Because it was all about her and her building a great company and accumulating all this fabulous wealth. What's interesting, since we're in a room full of CFOs, is she actually hired a CFO early in the game, and he started to challenge some of her assumptions that she was making, in terms of market penetration and financials and whatnot. She fired him. He was a part-time CFO, and she never hired another CFO as long as she worked for the company. She just didn't want to be challenged. So, she's another one. A lot of people have thought Elon Musk is. I personally don't think he is. I just think he's a really brilliant man who's probably really difficult to work for. A lot of executives have left very quickly, despite working for, a company that can change the world and one of the coolest companies on earth. But I haven't seen any real signs that he's a psychopath. Another one who probably is Harvey Weinstein, who is a film producer. He made, you all know who he is. He's in prison right now, luckily. But here's a guy, he made, he was one of the best film producers of his generation. Shakespeare in the Park, I think, might have put him on the map, but he made a lot of people stars. And he actually wrote into his employment contract that he was allowed to sexually harass coworkers. He would just have to pay a monetary fine to do it. And that's one of the scary things about psychopaths. He literally guaranteed continued employment in advance, even if it was agreed that he sexually harassed somebody. And, this was an agreement, presumably it was approved by the board of directors. I'm going to guess that the chief financial officer and the top human resource executives were aware of it as well. And yet nobody stopped him because they liked Harvey and because he was making great and important art and everybody was getting rich along the way. So they let all of his negative habits go. And, it's kind of unfortunate that it happened. But again, a classic case, somebody who didn't accept blame. You'd say, Harvey, you raped these women. He justified it because he made Jennifer Lawrence and Gwyneth Paltrow stars. So, or he was one of the first producers who gave in large numbers women the opportunity to direct his films. He was a little bit ahead of the curve like that. He, in fact, has won awards. You can go on YouTube and see Michelle Obama giving him an award for his treatment of women, which was at that point in history was thought to be highly positive. So just a classic case of some awful people. And I don't think Jobs and Musk are necessarily awful people, but just tricking some very sophisticated people and getting away with it for a long, long time. And okay, so we're done. That's my contact information if anyone wants to reach out to me. I'm hoping most of you who are on are more curious or find the topic interesting and aren't dealing with it.
I think Tariq had a question.
Okay, why don't I undo it?
Hi, Jack.
Hey, Tariq. We've met,
My
haven't we?
apologies. I was a little late and held up with some technical issues. Any thoughts on being psychotic for those two names I'm going to mention? And please don't take me any way in a political way. Mark Zuckerberg as well as Jeff Bezos. Any thoughts on that? And finally, our ex-president, Mr. Trump.
Yeah, you said psychotic, but I'm guessing you mean psychopathic.
Psychopathic.
Yeah, they're definitely not psychotic unless they're really skilled at hiding it.
Any thoughts on those three names, please?
Yeah, I've heard it assigned to all of them. Yeah, it's people have told me that I look like Jeff Bezos, so I don't want to criticize him. They certainly display a lot of the traits and whatnot. And like my frustration with Trump is like I've spoken to professionals and I'm not, which to a degree is liberating, but I spoke to an MD who's a professor at Harvard, and she would not say that Trump was a narcissist. Well, I have to study him. It's like, gosh, what more evidence do you need that this guy's a narcissist, right? I might put him more in the narcissist category. And there are some differences. A psychopath thinks they're better than you and they want you to know it and they want the world to know it, and a narcissist, I'm sorry, psychopath doesn't care if you know it. They think they're better than you. They just want to get rich from that. And as long as they know it, they crave money and power. But a narcissist craves money and power and sort of the world to bow before them and acknowledge their intellect, which is why I put Trump in the narcissist bucket. Again, you can criticize me for not being a clinician. That's valid. Doesn't mean I'm wrong either, though, right? But yeah, I would say both Mark and Jeff, I'm on a first name basis with both of them, I won't go so far as to say that they are, but I will say that they display many of the traits of psychopathy.
How about Jeff Bezos?
Yeah, him too. Yeah, Trump I will say is a narcissist. I mean, you know, it just hits you over the head, right? And I'm not talking about his politics here. You know, guys don't need to know what my political views are. I'm talking about his behavior. And, you know, he's clearly got some narcissistic traits. By the way, there are a lot of people that have said every single US president was a psychopath. Which, you know, it's interesting. It's probably not hard for us to imagine that Trump is one, but Barack Obama, you know, is he a psychopath? Geez, I don't know. But then you sort of look at it, and does he check some of the boxes? Maybe, you know, and, you know, maybe you have to be a psychopath to even want the job. I don't know. But multiple people have told me that. Fernando, very polite. I see your hand up, sir.
Yes. I would like to know your view about this group. For instance, I believe that some of us in our belt, in our history, we have worked with someone that fits that behavior. But in my case, as a conclusion, is dealing with the personality like that it drains a lot of you know, one's energy, because you not only need to do your work but also deal with that situation and then comply and achieve and you know, meet goals and whatnot. And at the same time, which this is something I did, I tried to see the benefits of it. It's like developing more skills in dealing with those. But it gets to a point like you said in one of your slides, is knowing when to quit. So what is your opinion about developing a strength or some sort of emotional muscle to deal with the situation while one takes the action to exit or somehow resolve the situation?
It's a tough one, Fernando, because that's such a personal thing, right? I mean, I've known people, they are going to, you know, they're loyal to their company, to their employees, and they think it's worth it to fight to the death with this battle, and they're not going to give up. And, you know, I guess kudos to them for being that way, but is it worth it at the cost of your health? Is it worth it at the cost of your relationship with your family, that you can't go home? And, you know, we've all been in sort of conventional garden variety stressful situations. I haven't been a CFO in a while, but y'all are pretty good at dealing with stress, I'm sure. And it comes up a lot. But this is something different. This is fundamentally a guy that can destroy the company that you work at and destroy the lives of the employees, and, you know, maybe take down your reputation too. And they're unbalanced. You know, how important is this job in this company and this group of employees to you? You know, is it worth ruining your life, maybe ruining your career and your reputation over? And, you know, that's just a personal thing. You know, I hate to advise people to quit, but, you know, there are some battles that just aren't worth fighting, you know, and, you know, what's important to you, right? And the other factor is that you're one of the founders of the company versus just somebody who happens to work there. And, you know, how badly do you need the job, right? Like, one thing about Harvey Weinstein, like the woman that he picked on, I'm not talking about the assault stuff, but the harassment on the set. Like, you know, he bragged to everybody that he had a fling with Jennifer Lawrence, and, you know, he harassed Gwyneth Paltrow and a lot of other, like, really young people. But, like, when he worked with older women who were more established, he behaved perfectly professionally. Julianne Moore, you know, Meryl Streep referred to him as God, because, you know, what can Harvey Weinstein do to someone like Meryl Streep, right? And even Julianne, Juliana, I forget. I'm not Mr. Movie Buff here, but, you know, she was a bit of an established star by the time that she worked for him, and, you know, she wasn't weak that he could prey on. But Gwyneth Paltrow, 19 years old when she did Shakespeare in Love, who'd ever heard of Gwyneth Paltrow? Yeah, the talent's there. She's beautiful, but she's nothing. I can make her miserable and get away with it. She's not going to say a goddamn thing. Forgive me, I'm not trying to justify it if it came across that way. That's his mind, not mine. So did I answer your question, or did I just ramble on about nothing? Because I've been known to do that.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Okay,
Hey,
sure.
Tisha, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi.
Tisha.
Hi, Jack. Thank you very much for doing this. My question is two parts. Number one, is there a gender breakdown?
Isha, can you speak up? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, you're good.
Is there a gender breakdown of psychopaths? And then also, would you put Martin Shkreli in that category?
First one, yeah. Almost all psychopaths are male.
Oh, I disagree.
It would appear. You're wrong. It's like 85% of them are male. And now to John's point, and I'm not sure where he's going to go, but I do want to answer the question. There are theories on this. One is there are people that think women are just better at getting away with certain things than men. You know, that society is a little bit more forgiving and a little bit more trusting of women. And there's also theories that it might manifest itself in different ways. But like, according to a lot of published statistics, it's like 85%. That's why I actually make it a point to include Elizabeth Holmes, because I don't want to, in the book, I do an analysis on 6 CEOs and they would all be men. So, you know, I don't want to say thank God for Elizabeth Holmes, but it is good that one of them is a woman. So, and what was your other, you mentioned something. I didn't recognize his name, Tisha. What was his background?
He's the Pharmobro, Martin Shkreli. I'm probably messing up his last name.
No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah, I think I know who you're referring to. There was something about a pill that it was like, you know, it was like $11 and he suddenly was selling it for $2,000 when it found out
exactly.
He got money from hedge funds.
Yeah, I never thought of him until this moment in that context, but boy, you know, on the surface, he checks some of the boxes, doesn't he, Tisha? You know, and again,
He sure does.
Yeah, he certainly seems like a good candidate for that sort of thing. So, John?
If I could add a couple things. First of all, I'll agree with you on your analysis of Trump. One of the things you hadn't mentioned is that being a psychopath is a form of a antisocial personality disorder. And there are several of these, but being a narcissist is one of those. And I think you put Trump in the right box by saying he had a narcissistic antisocial personality disorder. Hare, in his research, said he thought psychopathy in women was severely underdiagnosed. In my own life, I have 2 female cousins who both fit into that category. So I've got some firsthand experience with it.
Oh yeah, it's not like it's zero, but it's if the 85 to 15 ratio is correct, you know, that's similar to crime rates generally. And again, most criminals are not psychopaths and most psychopaths are not known to be criminals. But unfortunately, you know, and I guess I can say this because I am a guy, a lot of these problems in society are from guys, you know, I mean, whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it's not like there are none out there. And yeah, I have read some people do think it's underdiagnosed amongst the female sex. And, you know, it just may manifest itself that way. And the other thing, like the person I interviewed for my book, and like what annoyed him, most of the research on psychopaths has been done in men's prisons. You know, that's, if you want to interview 50 people, that's the way to do it. And, you know, because you can get a bunch of them there and start having conversation. But he's like, but that's not me. I admit I'm a psychopath. I knew I was different as a teenager. And in my 20s, I figured out what it was. But he's like, but I don't go around committing crimes. I mean, yeah, sure. I'm ruthless, just like, you know, just like it says, but doesn't mean I'm going out there breaking the law. I have no desire to break the law. And he actually got into, he brought it up himself. It's a little bit of a sidebar, but he brought it up totally, you know, on his own. He started talking about racial prejudice. And he thought as a psychopath, and by the way, clinical diagnosis don't support his own view, but I'll share with you his view. He just didn't really understand prejudice of any kind. He's like, look, this is all about what somebody can do for me. If they can help make me rich, what do I care if they're black or white? And he said his father growing up didn't like Jewish people. And, you know, forgive me for saying that, but, you know, anti-Semitism is a real thing in this country and whatnot. He just didn't understand that at all. You know, it's like if the person could do something good in your life, what difference do their religious beliefs make to you? What difference does the race make? And he actually went so far, you know, like Black Lives Matter is what he said. It's like, you know, are people stupid? Is it not obvious that Black Lives Matter? Why do we even need something like that? And he said, if psychopaths ran the world, there would be no racial prejudice because there's no need for it. So, you know, and I'm not even sure what I said. Unfortunately, he wouldn't let me record him to prompt him to talk about that. But he, you know, that's something he felt very strongly about, and he viewed as a character flaw in people without these personality disorders. And yeah, to John's point, the person, there's the dark triad, it's called. It's sociopathy, psychopathy, and then Machiavellianism. They're very similar. And, you know, when I diagnosed, you know, when I was sort of doing my amateur diagnosis on people, I got it wrong a lot. One thing that's interesting, psychopaths don't seek fame. So like the people I spoke to, the examples I gave, they said there might be a more compelling argument that they're narcissistic than that they're psychopathic. They're very similar. You know, the distinction I gave earlier, another one is a narcissist can actually feel shame and embarrassment, whereas a psychopath supposedly cannot. So,
Well,
but
and
Tisha, did I answer your question? I see you muted, so.
one and another thing you didn't say, but of course I'm sure you've read this in many places, is that one of the other things that psychopaths are looking for is sex. And frankly, a typical crime by a female psychopath is that because she can put on the psychopathic mask, just as male psychopaths can, and be whatever you want them to be. We've all heard of stories of somebody going on vacation or meeting somebody in a bar, and they instantly had this deep psychological connection, and they felt that they just met their soulmate. And in a very short period of time, they've moved in together, and next thing you know, she has emptied out the bank account. She has had all the furniture moved out. She's taken the car and completely disappeared. So the kind of crimes committed by women who have this personality disorder are often very different than the kind of crimes men commit.
And the other thing, like when females, like in high school, like men sometimes solve their problems, and before that with a physical fight. But females never do that. You know, their aggressiveness just shows up differently. A lot of times it'll be like reputational damage. So rather than get in a fight with somebody you don't like, you might spread rumors about her and or that sort of thing. Just do whatever you can to ruin somebody's reputation. It just shows up a little bit differently than it does with men who, you know, when you're 12 years old, you know, I have 7 male cousins. I was in a physical fight with every one of them at some point in my childhood. We all lived near each other. And
that's just normal boyhood.
Yeah, but I mean, none of my female cousins, and you know, a similar number that I know of, none of them ever hit each other. You know, we hit each other all the time, and you know, that was the way it was. But they did other mean things to each other. So yes, it's not like it's not a problem, but yeah, it'll show up a little bit differently. So, but yeah, you know, thrill seeking is different for men than it is for women. So
here we have Tariq with one question.
Not a question, just an observation, Jack. I noticed working with some of these psychotic CEOs, one thing was very common. Not many people stayed with them for very long. So as my next assignment comes up, I always check on the CEO to see, am I going to be able to work with him or not? And I found many a times that if he had an issue retaining his CFO, there was something to do with psychopathy in there, maybe not totally, but there was a whole bunch of stuff which was checking all the boxes. And a couple of times I took the assignment, and I've been doing part-time CFO thing for nearly 20 years. So I have gone through some roughly similar number of CEOs. And it turned out to be true every time that I didn't necessarily want to take it. I had a slot of 2 days available in a week. I took it. I said, what the heck? Worst come to worst, I'll quit. And that's exactly what happened. And the idea was either you're with them or you're not with them. They'll throw you under the bus any minute without blinking.
Yeah, you can go from ally to enemy in a nanosecond. Absolutely.
Right. So
but I have a question for you, Tariq.
Let me just finish. So I work you will work very nicely with them for 2 years or 1 year and a little bit more. And intention is that you'll continue with them. However, something will trigger that trait in their personality where they will literally just throw you under the bus. And before you know it, board is all over you saying, well, you know, one of you got to leave. We can't let him go, so you got to leave. Just an observation I wanted to share.
Yeah, that's exactly. But you know, you're not likely to win that battle. But I have a question for you. Let's say someone who is qualified to make the diagnosis, not me, said to you, Elon Musk, I got to tell you, Elon Musk is a psychopath. But I have an opportunity. You can work for Elon Musk for 1 year. Would you take the job?
For the pleasure of it, I would.
It's a show of hands by those who are visible. Actually, those who aren't, if you want to put up that clap sign. But the thumb down. Okay. So yeah, and John's the only one, at least, who has acknowledged that he's dealt with this within his life. So, you know, you can sort of understand what his reluctance would be. But so Rudolph says he would not. But, you know, it's interesting. I probably would. You know, you'd learn more from Elon Musk in a year than you would in any MBA program, right? And, you know, the fact is he's not out there violating the law, or at least that I know. I mean,
and to Fernando's point, there is enough pressure on you as is. You don't need the extra burden on you, but it invariably ends up and you take it home and your home life gets affected. You're always tense. You're hardly able to relax and all that because there is this extra bit of thing you have to deal with, not the normal. And I noticed that much more in the publicly listed companies. Every quarter, you got to stand up in front of the analysts and all that, and you could see the nudges, the slight pokes being made at you if you're not on the same page as CEO. And at times they will openly say, you're with me or not, we're going to say this today, that our projections are this, this, and this. And if you're not on it, or if you're not with me on this point, stay away from it.
mm-hmm.
So, and that becomes very difficult because a lot of the time analysts are asking questions directly to CFO. What do you think about, you know, X number of sales or whatever? And you're kind of giving muted answers. They can pick up the vibes as well. And it's hard.
Yeah, it's an awful situation, right? I mean, all of us, not all of us, but a large number of us as CFOs, we've been in a situation where, you know, the bosses put financial projections or some other statements that you maybe don't think the boss is lying, but maybe you think he's a cockeyed optimist or she's a cockeyed optimist or exaggerating. And maybe you do think the boss is lying, right? But I mean, more than a few people have told me the boss made these fanciful projections and right in front of the entire board said, okay, so Mike made these projections, our CFO, Mike, take it away, and didn't have advance warning. What are you going to do? In front of the whole board say the boss is a liar?
Right.
Probably what you should do, but who would, right?
It's almost like being Dr. Fauci in Trump's era.
That's actually a perfect analogy.
Yeah, he would say this and Trump will turn around and just put him in a different orbit altogether. And then who's right and who's wrong is up to the media to pick it up. Thank you.
Sure. Now, how